Bonjour, monsieur.
Bonjour, madame.
Je suis allée aux champignons dimanche.
In France, picking and eating wild mushrooms and toadstools is a way of life. Whether you live in the town or the country, it's something you grow up with. There are even high street chemists who will check your trophies while you wait. The pharmacist takes a 2-year course to sort out the good and the not so good for customers who don't have the confidence on their own. Everywhere in France, there are signs of the sheer enthusiasm for mushrooms. Colour posters distinguish the comestibles and the vénéneuses. But not every country is so dedicated as France. So how should we start? Buy a book. It's best to take your first steps into wild mushroom delights with an expert, but you also need a good reference book. Go for one which is well recommended. It needs accurate illustrations and descriptions, but make sure the words are in language you can actually understand. Watch out for incomprehensible jargon. Forget the mystique. A lot's down to common sense. It's like looking for wildflowers. You need to know where to look, the right kinds of countryside for different species. There's not too many field fungi around anymore. So the message is probably to the woods.
Right, this is where it all gets good fun, because we're going out to collect mushrooms and toadstools to eat. And if you're going, apart from having the reference book, there are a couple of essential bits of equipment you need. You want a basket, something like that. A wooden trug would do just as well, because you don't want to pile mushrooms and toadstools on top of one another, particularly the delicate ones. They'll start getting crushed. The other thing you need is a kitchen knife, because although it's best to pick them by the roots, you may have to cut some of the tougher ones. Now resist the temptation to put them in polythene bags, because they go stale and mushy and the condensation builds up in the bag, and you've got pretty horrible toadstools at the end of the day. One other little tip: when you're collecting them, lay them cap down, gills up, but brush the dirt off, because during the day all the dirt dries and it all falls down between the gills, and there is nothing worse than gritty mushrooms in your pan.
The mushroom season proper is autumn. That's when the real bloom happens. But for some species, we've got to start looking in high summer. So long as the weather isn't too dry, mushrooms and toadstools begin to emerge from June onwards. And among them are some of the prize specimens for eating.
Somewhere along here, according to my local information, there is the mushroom gastronome's dream. It's supposed to be in these nettles. They take a bit of seeing at first. Now that, just in here, this looks interesting. Yes. Now, why do they have to be in nettles? So we go this one. Right. Now that may not look too exciting at first, but I suspect this is the shape of things to come. Hey, look at those. Just look at that. Now that is a giant puffball. Proper name for it is Langermannia gigantea. And believe it or not, I suppose that's about a third of the maximum size. They can grow to 40 or more inches across those things. It's at about its ripest state now, whilst it still remains white. Any more than that, it'll start to go brown, and then the whole thing decomposes into just a great big mass of spores. And believe it or not, somebody calculated, I don't think by counting them one by one, that one of those things can hold 7,000 billion spores. Why the world's not populated by giant puffballs, I'll tell you later. If you're going to eat them, they need to be in this sort of condition. They need to be young and firm, and they need to be white right the way through. Now look at that. That is in an absolutely perfect state. It's white all the way through. They used to serve these things up on state occasions in the Freemasons Tavern in London. And the usual way of cooking them is to cut them into thin slices and then dip them in egg and breadcrumbs and very, very likely saute them. But I think a nice alternative, I found this in an old recipe book, is that you hollow out the middle and you chop up all the middle stuff and then you mix it with chestnut stuffing. Put the whole lot back into the shell and then you put some bacon over the top and you put a lot of butter onto it, wrap the whole thing in aluminium foil and then you bake it in the oven for about half an hour. Wonderful.
But for the real burst of wild mushrooms, it's definitely got to be to the autumn woods. Mixed woodlands tend to produce the best spread of species. It makes sense to start your adventure into fungi with species that have very definite features. The ones that say, it's me, I can't possibly be mistaken for anything nasty. Now this is another one which is easy to identify because it doesn't have gills. It doesn't have pores either, actually. It's got little spines underneath it, see? And it's called a hedgehog fungus. Now the spines are obviously a giveaway. But the other way to identify it is that it's got this lovely sort of whitish cream look all over. Just looks like newly baked white bread. The only problem with this is that it's a bit bitter if you eat it raw. So the thing to do with it is to cut it into small pieces, boil it for about 5 minutes, chuck the water away, which gets rid of all the bitterness, and then you can casserole it in onions, milk, seasoning, you name it. Turns out absolutely delicious. They sell this in the markets in Italy, and it's called Stecherino, little hedgehogs. Now, over the other side of this wall, there is a real goodie. Many of the specimens which are relished as gourmet's dreams are not actually that infrequent.
You haven't lived until you've eaten chanterelles. One of the nice things about them is that as you're walking along, they really smack you in the eye. You can't mistake them for anything else. They grow under beech trees and under conifers, and they are wholly apricot yellow. Start off with a slightly domed cap like that, but as they get older, they finish up with a funnel-shaped cap, and instead of having gills, they've got little blunt forked ridges underneath. They're called la girole in France. Wonderful fungus for cooking. The only thing you could possibly mistake it for, incidentally, is a thing called Hygrophilopsis aurantiaca, which is the false chanterelle, but it's not really similar, and it's got real gills to it.
The chanterelles aren't typical. Most of the good edible mushrooms you'll find in the woods are built on more familiar lines, like the wood parasol. Now this has a distinctive shaggy cap. It's got a tough stalk with a bulbous base and an obvious ring and white gills protected from the wind and weather by the cap. Colour is a vital identification feature, although it can vary according to age and weather conditions. A mushroom can start white and finish tan and blotched, like the spotted tuftshank. And there's nothing quite like the amethyst agaric, Laccaria amethystina. It looks pretty, it tastes good, and its colour is unmistakable. And you need your nose. Curry fungus will scent a whole pine wood with the aroma of curry, and it's actually used as a condiment, but without smelling it, you might pass it by as another small, uninteresting specimen. But whatever you pick, make sure it's young and healthy. If it seems bedraggled or it has wormholes, forget it. Any fungus for eating must be firm-fleshed and look fresh. This is a close cousin of the amethyst agaric, known as the deceiver, Laccaria laccata, because its appearance alters a lot with age and weather. But here, it's in the peak of condition. some of the most delicious are the Boletus mushrooms. Most of them are pretty safe. No gills underneath, but spongy pores. The colour of the pores and any changes of colour with bruising are vital features. Boletus chrysantron pores turn green when you press with your thumb. Their most famous member is the cep, Boletus edulis. Author Jane Grigson is a dedicated fan.
There's nothing to beat the wild ones that you find growing in the forest. I mean, my particular favourite, well, I have two favourites really, cep and girole. And the cep is that wonderfully brown-headed, smooth mushroom with a spongy underneath. And that stays firm when you cook it. It's got the most delicious texture, sort of almost waxy. It's lovely. Oh, you can do so much with it. You can pretty well grill it like a steak, as they do in Italy. Or you can slice it up and cook it with garlic and oil and parsley, which is the Bordelaise way. Or you can add it to stews. It's marvellous with chicken. If you make a chicken stew with cep, it tastes absolutely delicious. It's got a wonderful flavour.
Well, now this is one you can't miss. It always grows in mown grass, very often by roadsides, and it's called, for reasons which will be fairly obvious, the judge's wig or the shaggy ink cap. Now you have to eat it when it's in this sort of condition, absolutely pure white inside. It mustn't have any black on it. I have a soft spot for this because it was the first mushroom that I ever ate. It's got a very, very mild flavour, so you need to eat it perhaps cooked very gently in something like white wine with a little bit of nutmeg and a little bit of seasoning. Don't overcook it. Wonderful mushroom.
Edible fungi, you begin to realise, sometimes really look like mushrooms, at least in shape. The honey fungus is pretty distinctive, as is the blewit. Impossible to mistake that lilac colour of the gills and the stem. But then again, take the extraordinary beefsteak fungus, with its rubbery flesh dripping what looks remarkably like blood, or the strange and delicate jewsia that only grows on elder trees. It's said to have got its name, incidentally, because Judas Iscariot hung himself on an elder tree. And you realise that some species just don't look like mushrooms at all.
There are one or two that grow very intimately linked with trees. And there's one in particular that always grows either in rotten stumps or beside old pine trees. It's called cauliflower of the woods. It's one of those once seen, never forgotten jobs. You've got to pick it if you're going to eat it in this sort of state, when it's really looking like a cauliflower and it's white and creamy. The trouble with this thing is that because it comes up through the pine needles, it tends to get married to a few needles on the way up, and you've got to pick them out. But that is absolutely beautiful. The interesting thing about that is that you can actually store it for about a week with the base of it in cold water. And the way to cook it is to slice it through. I don't slice my hand as well. Take nice thin slices of it. It's got this intriguing sort of shape to it, slightly nutty flavour to it. And then either saute it or casserole it with a few herbs, or you can dry it. It's one of those excellent ones to dry. On the continent, they cook it with breadcrumbs and egg, but that is worth having, so we'll put it in the basket.
Just as there are mushrooms for the asking in summer and autumn, so the spring has its own particular gems. London restaurateur Antonio Carluccio goes hunting for one famed specimen on the edge of a local football pitch.
Guarda là. Wow. Che bel gruppo di belli. The St. George's is special because it grows, that's why it's called St. George's mushroom. around the 23rd of April, which is the St. George's Day. And it's a lovely, lovely mushroom, very firm, very tasty, and wonderful, fresh, musty smell. That can be cooked also in salads, a very special way to blanch them a little bit, and then sauteed with a little bit of olive oil and garlic and chili, and a bit of lemon, and you can eat them cold. But I prefer them sauteed in butter with garlic and parsley, a little bit of salt. They're very good.
Well, you need to do as little as you possibly can. Of course, when you pick them in the forest, they've often got wormholes and you have to cut them out. The thing is to avoid soaking mushrooms in water. If you have to wash them, I think it's better if you can just wipe them. If you have to wash them, you need the very quickest rinse. And then there you are. You just cut off the damaged bits, or the earthy bits.
One of the most bizarre-looking edible fungi, the morel, also pops up in spring woodlands. Looks weird, but it makes a succulent, faintly exotic dish. Morels are taken pretty seriously in the Périgord region of France. Sarlat, 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and already the market in the medieval town is bustling. People arrive from all over the region, some to sell their produce, including wild mushrooms, others to stock up on essentials or the many gourmet treats on offer here. A bowl of spring garlic soup, piled high with croutons, starts the day for Jean-Claude Montet. He buys mushrooms here in the market, but not before he and his colleagues have had a chance to catch up on their news and enjoy a chabrol, the local tradition that calls for the soup plate to be cleaned up with a glass of red wine. Soup is followed by an omelette, made with a kilo or more of the precious morels. They claim these breakfasts only happen on special occasions, but then again, each week there's something to celebrate. The first morel, the new garlic, every week for 52 weeks of the year. For Monsieur Montet, the local collectors are important, and he respects the way they work.
Le champignon se ramasse en France librement et souvent en famille, mais quand même c'est souvent ramassé par des gens qui connaissent beaucoup la nature, qui respectent la nature et qui ramassent que les champignons qu'ils voient. C'est-à-dire qu'ils ne grattent pas, ils n'enlèvent pas les feuilles, ils ne ramassent que le champignon visible et pas les tout petits, parce que celui qui ne connaît pas suffisamment, s'il va chercher les champignons la première semaine où il y a la pousse, il peut tout écraser, la récolte de 1 mois, tout écraser.
Each Saturday morning, Monsieur Montet sets up his stall, and the species brought to him vary according to the season. Today, there are some early ceps, but mostly it's morels. Not all the morels collected actually reach him at the market, because the locals have mixed feelings about parting with their goodies. Many take the attitude, if I can fill a whole basket, it's worth taking them to the market, but if I find just half a basket, I might as well enjoy them for myself. From his distribution centre in Brive, Monsieur Montet supplies restaurateurs all over Europe with exotic species. These include inotaki from Tokyo, ceps from Turkey and Pakistan, and even wild mushrooms from Scotland. What the customers are buying, along with the product, is a sense of security. So every single mushroom is checked over to make sure that no rogues have crept in. In some years, there's even a glut of certain species, and the price goes down. Then it makes sense to freeze or dry the more valuable mushrooms for future use. Certainly, the French take their mushrooms seriously enough to warrant a mushroom boutique, which sells just about every possible edible species, dried, tinned, or frozen when not available fresh. Away over in eastern France, near Nantua, they view morels with equal reverence. Gilbert Delavenay is a local devotee and a fungal connoisseur, and he knows all the good locations high in the pine forests of the Jura.
Oh là. Oh, joli. Ah, c'est une morille. Ici, là, comme ça, ben, tiens, avec l'épicéa, là. Autrefois, il y avait beaucoup plus de champignons, enfin, au sens large, des morilles comprises. Ceci étant dû, d'une part, il y avait beaucoup moins de personnes qui les récoltaient. D'autre part, il est évident qu'on est obligé de constater une certaine pollution dans nos régions, enfin sur notre planète. Et il est évident que tous ces champignons-là vont disparaître un jour ou l'autre.
Is it just the French who have this obsession with collecting them?
Non, nous avons nos amis suisses qui viennent fréquemment ramasser nos champignons, car chez eux, la cueillette est interdite. Alors ils viennent en France avec tout ce qui comporte comme désagrément, puisque pour le passage des frontières, ils sont surveillés eux aussi.
Does that make you cross?
Alors évidemment, disons donc, s'ils cueillaient, disons donc, des champignons uniquement pour manger eux-mêmes, ça irait, mais lorsque c'est pour les vendre, c'est autre chose.
It doesn't matter where you're collecting, conservation is too important to be ignored in the urge to gather a basketful of delights. The fungus relies on its mushroom fruiting body to reproduce and spread itself. It's vital to collect specimens sensibly.
As a nation, I guess the British have been mycophobic. They've generally had a fear of mushrooms and toadstools. But in continental Europe, where mushroom picking is much more of a sport, a passion even, there is evidence that the picking of boletes and chanterelles are causing reductions in populations. So we're trying to develop a conservation policy, and we've recently appointed a conservation officer. In general, people should be encouraged to go out and pick fungi and look for them, but only to pick what they need, not to go back to the same site year after year, picking everything they can find, and providing they follow that sort of common sense rule and respect the country code, of course, then no damage should be done.
Sound advice, and if it's followed, the joy of mushroom hunting will not be threatened, even if our woodlands have diminished to a fraction of their former glory.
Mushroom magic.